Welcome to the Car Ride Home podcast, where once a month we'll bring you stories, tips, and inside looks at the world of youth soccer. From the training ground to game day and everything in between. Whether you're a player, a coach, or a proud parent, this is your place to learn, laugh, and keep your finger on the pulse. So let's get in the car, drive home together. Let's go. Today's guest is someone who embodies what it means to love the game for more than just the results. Megan McCormick, head coach of St. Louis City's U14 Pathway Program and U16 Academy, believes that soccer's real beauty lies in its imperfections and in the process of growth that young players go through. From playing in the Women's Professional Soccer League with Indiana United to coaching with programs like the US Soccer Federation, USYS Olympic Development, Mare and DePauw Universities, and Colorado Rush, Megan's journey through the game has been shaped by both her background in education and her passion for teaching. In this conversation, we'll talk about her path through soccer, as always our guest philosophy, and what makes our beloved St. Louis such a unique soccer community, and why relationships and culture matter just as much as tactics and training. Please welcome Megan McCormick. How are you?
Great, thanks. So excited to be here.
Well, welcome to the Car Ride Home podcast. Can't wait to get into what you're doing over at our beloved St. Louis City MLS team and the academy over there with the pathway, how you look at players, how you evaluate, and all that wonderful stuff. But before we get into the nitty gritty, which is what we say back home when we want to get to the meat and potatoes of everything, traditionally on every podcast, we always say, who are you? How did you get to where you are? So fill us in on your journey and how you ended up here in St. Louis doing what you're doing.
Yeah, it's always a funny story. I think it's always the first question that people ask, and my story is probably different because I think I came to the game sort of kicking and screaming, quite literally. Wow. I think I was a young kid growing up in Southern Indiana, and growing up there, basketball is the thing. Is king. Right. That's what you do when you're young, no matter how good or bad you are at it. And so I fell in love with basketball. And then coming into high school, lots of friends that were soccer players, and grew up in a really small town with a small high school, and got a phone call from the soccer coach right coming into my freshman year, who said, I think this would be a great way to stay fit for basketball season.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I said, no, thank you on the phone. And a couple of my friends caught wind of the conversation, and I think he probably put them up to it, but they started recruiting pretty hard in the summer before my freshman year. And so I went out for the team, and I think, yeah, kind of the rest is history. I fell, with some challenges in the high school sports environment, and basketball sort of fell out of my life, and then right. Soccer became the main stage, and yeah, everything else has kind of followed.
So what were the challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the same things we see across like youth sports, I think in the US, a lot of politics, a lot of, ran into some personalities and some coaches that didn't maybe prioritize the person first before the athlete, and those sorts of things. And, an environment in a small town in high school where it was often maybe not perceived positively if you were playing other sports. Right. And lots of us were multiple sport athletes, and so felt like we were maybe getting the short end of the stick in the basketball arena because of the other commitments we had. And so it was a decision going into my junior year to walk away from basketball. And I think I was confident in doing it because I had soccer. Right. And had other things that I was really passionate about and really enjoyed. And yeah, that maybe was a good catalyst looking back now in hindsight for setting the stage for other decisions that I made later related to coaching or career changes, where knowing that I could walk away from or maybe close a chapter on something that had served a really important purpose in my life, right, with the confidence to know that like something else would come next. Right. Yeah.
Wow. So when did you, obviously if you got into soccer at that point, when did you kind of realize, you know what, this is actually something that I really want to delve into?
Yeah, probably like around, my junior year of high school. And again, my story is really different because I didn't start playing till I was probably like 14. Right. Like
wow, that's late nowadays.
Yeah. Other than one or two seasons of like the sort of prerequisite recreational soccer that everyone plays at 6 and 7 years old. Right. Yeah, and so it's probably around my junior year that my high school coach and a club coach that I was playing for at the time started asking me, well, where are you going to play collegiately?
Right.
And I was kind of like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And so really started maybe like planting the seeds and pushing me. And I didn't ultimately play in the NCAA because of my major and other things. But I think that was probably the moment that I was like, oh, this might be something that I could be really good at and really, really chase outside of just wanting to do it to stay fit and wanting to do it as like part of a collective kind of thing.
Right. Well, I mean, clearly you made quite an impression playing at that point for them to be like, hey, you want to play at college. And did they help you connect the dots, or how did that happen?
Yeah, I think so. Like I remember going out on a lunch break with my high school coach and him saying, yeah, we're going to time your 40 and your 100.
Right.
Like, what? For what? He's like, oh, so we can, give it to some college coaches. And at the time, that was like something you did. And those were the things that like college coaches wanted to look at. And so, and then, other people maybe pushing me out of my comfort zone a little bit in that way and giving me the confidence that I probably didn't have in myself as an athlete at that point. But,
so when did the belief kick in where you was like, yeah, I'm solid?
Probably by my senior year, like of high school for sure. And then going on and again, getting some interest from a recruiting perspective, having opportunities to go and play collegiately in Division I environments, but ultimately making a decision to chase architecture as a academic major. And so was forced to choose between the two, chose architecture, but then realized I think I could still play. Like, I think I'm still good enough to play. And so that's when I started pursuing like opportunities with Indiana United and in the WPSL and just finding other ways to continue like chasing the game and playing for myself. Right. So yeah, it's a winding road, I think, in some ways, not quite as straight and narrow as a lot of people's path.
No, I know it never is, man. What was the process for you to get to Indiana United? How did that happen?
Yeah, so I was in college and I went to school at Ball State in Muncie, Indiana, which is about 45 minutes north of Indianapolis. I had a group of friends and people that I knew in Indianapolis from playing club there. Right. I actually grew up an hour south, but I played club in Indianapolis. I was like the biggest close city. So I had friends, and then I was not playing at Ball State, playing on the club team, and then I through friends like started playing indoor and playing some outdoor leagues in Indianapolis, and it was just through those connections, having a teammate or a friend that I was playing like indoor and adult leagues with say, hey, you should come try out for this team. It's a couple months a year, most of it's during the summer. Really fun group of players and coaches and everything else, and so did it and played for a couple of seasons. It was a lot of fun.
Right, good memories, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. So when you first got in that, because I'm always interested in the perspective of a young mind going into the big game kind of thing. You're playing D1, you're in that environment where you're surrounded by players that are super talented as well. Like how did you adapt to that? Was you like, I'm a little bit kind of nervous about playing in that environment? Was you kind of
it was interesting because like a handful of the players I had played with, like when I was selected and asked to play on the team through adult indoor leagues or outdoor kind of more adult recreational settings and those sorts of things. So I had some level of, I would say, like connection already with a handful of players. But then I think being in that environment and playing with, we had players who were actively on Notre Dame's roster, North Carolina's roster, like these active, big time college players. And then we also had a handful of players who had played abroad professionally in Sweden or in like some of these smaller leagues in Europe and that sort of thing, who had retired from playing at that level and come back to the US, who were maybe in their mid to late 20s. So it was interesting. It was a fun group to play with. The cross section was everywhere from like 18 years old to probably like 30. But just like, and I think for me, just adapting to, the game outside of just it being like a physical, test or a physical pursuit, playing with players who had played or maybe were a little bit older, a little bit smarter. You know, they weren't going to run if they didn't have to run, you know.
Smart decisions, right?
Yeah.
Smart, good
so
soccer IQ.
really good decision makers. And I think it was realizing early on I was a little out of my depth from that perspective. Like I always got by on really hard work and the sort of blood, sweat, and tears of the game. So that really like forced me to, you know, along with kind of dovetailing with like my start in coaching, like to think about the game differently, which I think was really powerful.
Right. Because that's really what I want to delve into. Obviously your background's super important from where you're getting to point A to point B, but like how did the decision about coaching come about? Did you just start to analyze the game, as you said, differently, start to look at it differently and then go, I want to impact this way? Or did you just fall into it?
Yeah, again, I think a little bit of shoved into it might be a better word.
I love it. You've been dragged through your whole career so far. It's great.
It's true. It's so true. And I think like it's when I look at where my role is now, it's the importance of finding people that I can drag now.
Right.
Or I can push, or I can sort of like bring from where they are to where maybe they don't know they can be. But yeah, it was, again, my senior year of high school. I had an assistant coach who was Scottish. I don't think he'd been in the States for a very long time. And, you know, small town Indiana. I don't know how he gets connected with the girls' high school soccer team as an assistant. And he was also coaching like in the local club, you know, some U13, U14 girls teams. And I think in the spring during the off season, he said, why don't, you know, before my senior year, why don't you come out and help me as an assistant? You know, why don't you come? And I think you'd really enjoy it and blah, blah, blah. Great. That's awesome. So I did it, really enjoyed it. Looking back, I think it was like a secret way to get me to work on my touch, get me extra touches,
I love it.
Get me a little more maybe
diversion tactic.
Yeah,
I love it.
A little more technical work probably was his motivation, but that was like my first taste of coaching. And then when I was at Ball State as part of the club team, I also coached the club team because we didn't have a coach, and it was just sort of like I was invested and willing to put the time in to plan the practices and for everybody, and a little taste of that. And then, yeah, I think through college had different opportunities to coach with a high school team in Muncie and do just like little things. I think other ways to stay connected to the game. It was like more driven by like my need to be around the game because I wasn't playing for the university.
Right.
And so finding ways for it to be in my life all the time was probably the driving force. And then when I graduated, I started working at a high school and working in education. And then it was really, oh, this is the same thing.
So after that, like, how did you, I mean, obviously now you're at St. Louis City. Obviously I'm aware of the great job that you've been doing there with, you know, with players, even players that I've been fortunate enough to coach myself, like just being in that environment. How did that whole journey go? Because I know you was involved in the Olympic Development Program. I know that you've been around, you know, a lot of opportunities. How did you get to coaching boys?
Yeah.
How did you end up getting to that place?
It's been interesting, and I think it's, you know, and someone, gosh, early in my sort of professional career, I don't remember if it was in like a work environment, a soccer environment, what it was, but someone was saying like, you know, everything that seems interesting, every opportunity that seems interesting, chase it, because you don't know where it's going to lead, and everything will just be preparation for whatever's next.
Right, I love that.
And so I think like it's always stuck with me, and I've really tried to live by that. You know, I graduated from college with a degree in architecture, which seems unrelated, but I knew I didn't want to work in architecture during my senior year, but it was too late in my mind to change my major.
Right. What made you get into that then, in the architecture? Where did that come from?
It was, you know, from a really young age, that's all I wanted to do. Like design, and was always really fascinated by just like the built environment and design and how those things happened, and continued really chasing it really single-mindedly all the way through my sophomore year of college. And then into my junior year, I was like, oh, the job of doing this looks very different than what like I imagined my like professional life to look like, sitting behind a computer screen. And I realized through internships and everything else, it was going to take 10 years of toil to get where I wanted to be as a designer. So I was like, I'm not willing to do that. design bathroom details and figure out where toilets fit in a building for 10 years before I could be the one making design decisions.
Right.
So yeah, but I finished the degree knowing that like you have a degree and now you can pivot and do what you want to do. And then, again, another mentor from an education space came to me and said, "Hey, we need a special education teacher for the fall at the high school. We think you have the personality and the skill set to do it, and we can get you an emergency teaching license. We'll get you a mentor. Like, would you be interested in doing it?" And so, again, thrust into the education space. And I think, yeah, it's that sort of allowed me the space to chase coaching in a more serious way. And my first coaching job, to answer your initial question of how did I get to City, was actually boys. High school JV boys, which in a small town in southern Indiana, you can imagine what that looks like. But it was a great opportunity, and I sort of didn't think twice about the gender kind of aspect of it, and maybe other people did. And looking back, I think, whoa, how did that not ever cross my mind? And then,
it's lovely that you didn't, because that's how it should be.
Yeah. And through like, the first handful of years, working in high school environments and club environments, and then eventually working in the college environment, and kind of that felt like the most natural progression. I sat down with my parents having graduated from college 2 weeks previous and said, I think I want to coach professionally full time. And they said,
what was their response?
"Is that even a thing?" I was literally word for word. And I said, "I think so. I'm not really sure what it looks like, but I think so." And so that was always kind of my North Star, I think. And then doing other things to try to chase that thing, and always finding real jobs that allowed me to chase coaching. And then, becoming a collegiate head coach and doing that, and then making the move to US Soccer as part of the start of the development academy. And that's really, I think, where a lot of doors were opened and just connections made, and your network grows so much. And then, with COVID and the sort of shutdown of the development academy, you think you're on a certain path, and then suddenly it's time to pivot again. It's been a fun journey for sure.
At what point throughout that process did you go, I need to get my licenses, I need to start focusing on that side of it, and wanting to maintain the skill set that you need to do that properly?
Again, I don't know who it was, unfortunately, so I can't even credit. My junior year in college, someone told me about coaching licenses. Had never heard about them, no idea the coaches I was growing up, if they were, what licenses they had. I'm sure they had licenses, but like it was never talked about. And so someone said like, "Well, yeah, you can get coaching licenses." Okay. So I did some research and signed up for a D license in Fort Wayne, Indiana, of all places, and did my D license while I was still in college. And then again, from that, one of the coach educators in that environment called me a couple weeks later and said, "Hey, we need an assistant with ODP. Would you be interested in coming and helping with some ODP stuff," and that sort of thing. And so I think that was a really good experience doing the license. And so then from there, it was just like kind of following the pathway and continuing to pursue that continuing education.
Right. So who dragged you to St. Louis City then?
Yeah, that one I can credit. That would be the one and only John Hackworth.
Okay.
And there's probably other people in the organization that have the same answer.
Right.
I think he's certainly someone, when you look at his kind of career path and where he's been in the different environments, I think he keeps tabs on people from different roles or different environments and that sort of thing, and then always trying to bring good people together in whatever role he's in. Yeah. So we were at US Soccer at the same time. He was coaching the under 17 boys national team in the residency program in Florida. I was working on the girls development academy side. So we crossed paths very rarely in the 3 years that I was there. But in technical meetings and just in different spaces. And then, when he came in and was working initially in the first year as the technical director with St. Louis City, he called me and said, "Have you ever thought about coaching boys again?" Because he knew I had experiences doing it. And I said, "I haven't thought about it recently. Why?" And he said, yeah, part of this new project. And
Right.
I think it's going to be really cool and really interesting. Like, you should come and talk to us. So yeah, and you know, we tried to figure out what made sense based on what I was interested in, what they needed, some of the programming that they were hoping to sort of implement, and really happy that it's worked out.
Wow, that's great. And what year was that you actually stepped into that?
I started in the summer of 2022,
Right.
so into my start of my kind of fourth full season with the club.
Crazy. All right, so I have some questions about just the academy approach in general. So, what qualities do you look for in a young player when identifying talent for St. Louis Academy?
Gosh, it's a great question, and we could probably spend an entire podcast or multiple, maybe a
Right.
season of podcasts.
That's right. I've got the time. If you got the time, we can sit all day. I'll get some food.
Just with that, you know, I think it's probably similar everywhere, and I think there you know, there may be nuance to the type of players or the profile of players positionally and those sorts of things. I think for us in St. Louis, first off, we're incredibly fortunate because like the talent pool with young players for the size of the market and the size of the city is incredible. It's watching players, and I think one of the things I always try to talk with folks about is like speed. Like speed is sort of incredibly important in soccer, and I think that feels like an obvious thing to say, but it's really like speed in three different areas. Like the most obvious, like how fast are you? How quickly do you get from point A to point B? How fast can you start, stop, turn, like all those sorts of things. And then the other two are like maybe harder to quantify or harder to like identify, but like what's the speed that you can execute on the decision that you've made? Yeah. So I want to play the ball from point A to point B. How quickly can I execute that skill? And the other one, which is I think the one that is the most challenging to identify and also the most challenging to develop, is like just the speed of recognition and decision making. Right. So you have to have two. If you're gonna, I think, as a young player to be identified and especially brought into a professional academy environment, maybe you're not physically really, really fast. That's okay. If your perception and decision making is really fast and you can execute really fast. Yeah. Maybe you're really fast physically. And that might buy you a little bit more time in the decision making part.
Yeah.
But then you got to be able to execute it quick. So like I think if you look at it in those three buckets, obviously the ideal is like you've got all three, or the ability to develop all three. You know,
what's amazing in that is when you have players, because obviously players that might not be strong in one of those areas, by not being strong in one of those areas, forces you to be better in other areas. So like the speed of the decision making is you know, if you're not big and you're not super physical, then you need to figure it out quick, because otherwise you're gonna get clouded by a player.
And I'll tell you, I always joke and you know, in any, you know, we do open trials, and then obviously we run the pathway program and those sorts of things. And people always ask like, okay, if you walk up to a field and there's a game going on, or there's a new group of players that you've never seen before, like what's the first thing you look for? Yeah. And I always tell people the same thing. I look for the smallest kid on the field. Because I think like there has to be something about that player
that allows him to survive in that environment. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so like really looking there first, and then, you know, you work your way from there. But I think those are always, for me, maybe other people look the opposite, like who's the biggest kid, who's the fastest kid, like the one that, you know, probably everybody and their brother and their friend and their family member could identify as being like an athlete. Yeah. And I'm probably looking for something maybe a little bit different, and my eye tends to look for the smaller players first.
Interesting.
To see what they're up to, and
it makes complete sense. Makes complete sense. I'm super like focused on teaching the mental side of the game. Like I feel that is so important, especially when they do have two of the three on the list or whatever, you know. Like you want to make sure that they're kind of approaching it. So what role do you think mental strength and character play in your selection of developing players?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like the actual selection process, I think it's really difficult, you know, especially in a professional academy environment. And we're really fortunate with the pathway program that we do get to kind of see players and have contact points with them over 6, 8, 10 months before maybe we make an offer for them into the full-time program. But you're still seeing such little slices and pieces of like who they are on the field, off the field, to make those decisions about what's their mentality, what's their drive, like what do they like between their ears. Yeah. But I think when they get into the environment, and really for me, like in any environment, not just like in St. Louis with the professional academy, I think the mental aspects of it are the thing that allows a player to make that final step. Right. And we've all seen plenty of players that were
fantastic that never quite made it.
Yeah, and you think, what was it? And maybe it's injuries or other things, or opportunity. But I think like the mental part of it, and specifically for young players, and we were actually talking about it before we started recording, but just what's your ability to deal with failure? Yeah. What's your ability to deal with setback, adversity? Most of the players coming into our environment haven't been in many spaces where everyone else is at such a similar level. Right. And so I think that can be, or they've never been in a space where they've been told you're not good enough, right, or you're not going to play, you're not going to start, you're not going to travel, whatever that looks like. Right. For a lot of players, that doesn't happen until college. Yeah. And for some of our players, that's happening in their U14, U15, U16, whatever that is, where we're saying, hey, maybe you've got some areas of your game that like aren't quite good enough. And I think the other one too, that I've really like over the last 2 years, especially, has become like a real point of focus for me, is helping kids in that environment understand you can do everything right. Yeah. You can do everything that we're asking of you, and someone else still might be better. Right. And I always use the analogy with young players because they don't have this experience anywhere else in their life most of the time. Yeah. Of math class. Yeah. Even if you don't love math, if you study hard enough and you put in enough effort, enough time, you listen to the teacher, you go to tutoring, you do all of the things, odds are you can get the A on the test. Because there's an unlimited number of A's available for the test. And in our environment, unfortunately, for the players, there's a limited numbers of those A's that get handed out. So I use the analogy with players in player meetings of, it's not that you're doing something wrong. Yeah. It's that right now, maybe there are other players or other factors that are out of your control that are putting you in the position that you're in. So I tell them, imagine you're in math class and only one kid in your class is allowed to get an A on the test. Yeah. How do you deal with that? Yeah. You can do everything in your power and it still might not work out. And I think we as adults and like professional, like you learn that as you get older. Yeah. And for young players who've maybe never had the experience in school or in club, it's always paid off if I worked hard enough. Yeah. I think that is something that I've like grappled with over the last 2 or 3 years. Like, how do we teach players that, but also teach it in a way that drives and motivates them instead of, well, then what's the point? If I can do all of this thing and put in all of this time and it still might not pay off, why bother?
So summarize that for somebody. I mean, obviously in your environment, you sit down with the player, you go through it, you give them that kind of context. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to players that have just club coaches, they're not involved in a pathway program or a professional academy? What would you give them for any kind of setback? Because you said failure and setback. And I think depending on your mindset, whether you're glass half full or glass half empty, is depending on how you see that. Like some people could be a setback as a perfect opportunity for a comeback, as opposed to, you know what I mean?
For sure.
So it's like, what advice would you give to somebody who feels like they're receiving feedback and they go inward and just go, well, clearly, if I didn't make it here in this environment, clearly I'm not good enough, period. What would you tell them?
Yeah, I think my knee-jerk reaction to the question is, just because it's not now doesn't mean it's not ever. And we all have stories of either peers or players or whatever it is that have been told no, and then suddenly it's yes. Yeah. And maybe from their perspective, there's not a lot that changed, and maybe it's the environment that changed or the needs that changed that don't have anything to do necessarily with them personally. That creates an opportunity where there wasn't one 6 months ago, 8 months ago, 10 months ago. And so I think it's having that mentality in those moments to say, okay, maybe the information I'm being given, whether I'm not being selected or I'm being told I'm not good enough or whatever that is, like it's all just feedback. And then how can you frame it in a way that you actually use it as guidance and as a tool for whatever it is that you do next, as opposed to seeing it as someone else having control and making the decision whether to close the door or leave it open. And again, I probably was too ignorant to see all the times where there were people sitting in front of me telling me like, hey, you might want to, I don't think you're good enough. Like, this probably isn't the right environment for you. Like, maybe I was just blind to it as a young person. But feeling like, and I think it is like trying to build an internal sense that you do have some level of control over your own development. And, the idea of a growth mindset, I think it's a term we throw around a lot, but maybe don't teach what that means. Yeah. Kids think it just means maybe like I want to get better. And really what it means is that, you're looking for adversity and you're looking for obstacles. You're looking for difficulty, knowing that those are things you can learn from, because that's where it's going to give you feedback and where it's going to give you maybe the information on where you need to dedicate time and energy to try to get better. Yeah. Absolutely. Yep.
What would you say are the biggest challenges facing MLS academies today, and how are you addressing them?
Oof. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No,
I thought about this.
Man, it's interesting. I think it's, we're so fortunate, right, in an MLS academy space in so many ways. And just looking at how much the league has grown and how much investment is being put into the academy space. And even if you rewind and thinking about 2020, when the development academy became no more and MLS next, and really MLS academies took the sort of step to take over the league and those sorts of things. Like, I think there's so much more attention, investment, etc. in the academy space. I think a challenge with that becomes the expectations are higher. Right. There is no more like, we're doing this as a service project. That this is also a business, right?
Conditions now.
And so I think there's a lot of like expectation and accountability to like produce players that go on and sign contracts and do help reinvest money into the club and into the development and all those sorts of things. So I think that's, it's a challenge, and I think like we're again so fortunate, and I think the big challenges are really, how do you maximize the development of every single player within your system? Right. Because we're not all as fortunate as PSG with the talent density of a city like Paris. Yeah. Where if a player doesn't work out,
the culture is different too.
And the culture is different, and all of those sorts of things. So I think there's certainly challenges there.
So with that expectation, like how do you measure success for what comes out the academy beyond producing professional players?
Great question. Obviously, that's the first and like sort of most obvious measure, is how many players per generation or per birth year, and over how many years are you like signing to professional, whether it's in your own environment, a homegrown contract, or somewhere else in different leagues and that sort of thing. But I think it's also looking at, are we progressing players through our own system from our pathway program? Are they progressing into our U18 roster, which our 09 age group now will be this year is the first year, based on when we started the pathway program, where the oldest team in our academy will have players that we worked with and identified through our pathway program. Right. So watching that over time, 100% of our under 14s right now came from that pathway program. So what's the matriculation into the U18 space of that group? And then I think it's, are we helping set players up for success as humans beyond whatever their time is at St. Louis City? Yeah. Is that collegiately? Is that professionally? Yeah. Is that,
or just as a young man?
Yeah, exactly. Like, are we setting them up to have the skills as much off the field? How do they talk to adults? How do they navigate advocating for themselves? What do they like in terms of their, their mental health, their resilience, like all those sorts of things that we know translate so far beyond the soccer field, and making sure that they have the tools they need to chase whatever's next.
How do you balance, obviously this is a results driven sport, right, as everything is. There's been times with teams that I've coached over the years where sometimes you can get the result, but the post game chat is still like, hey, listen, I know we got the result, but blah 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 blah.
Let's get on the bus and get out of here.
And then there's times when you've lost the game by 1 goal in the last minute and come off, and you're like, you know what, you played absolutely incredible today. So I know it's a results driven game, but how do you balance winning games at an academy level with the long-term player development? How do you balance it for what you're getting out and how you're supporting the players, the pathway that you're giving the players? How do you balance the fact that you could be doing that, still not getting the results? How do you approach the value?
I think it's important, and especially when it comes to like the interaction with the players, that the focus and the feedback and the framework is always focused on the process of the game and not the outcome. We talk about the outcome, obviously, especially in the environment where everyone wants to win. I think we're competitive about everything we do, from tying our shoes to filling out spreadsheets to stepping on the field to compete as an academy staff. We're competitive people by nature, and I think that part comes easily that when we talk about competing and trying to win. And
you only understand the value of winning if you've lost, right? So
exactly.
It kind of puts it into perspective.
And so I think it's really about like, how do you make sure that the feedback and the framing is consistent game to game to game, before and after, so that there's an objective, process for players to see how it went. So an example would be if we're looking at, and trying to frame it around their individual development plan as much as we can. So outside of the result, the feedback for that central midfielder might be, how did you do defensively in the game? Right? Like, how many times did you look to intervene? How many times did you regain the ball? How many times did it progress beyond you? And that's actually the feedback that we're looking at with that player, whether it's a 3-0 win or a 3-0 loss. What was his individual performance within that? And also really trying to spend time, depending on the age and the level, reframing the game afterwards in a way that then players can understand how was the process. So a game that we maybe squeaked by and we won 1-0, how successful was our press? How successful was our build? Our 1v1s? What was the, breakdown of final third entries for the two teams? And we've had experiences, and I've had experiences as a head coach, where on both sides, where you win a game 1-0 and you look at those statistics and it is very lopsided for the opponent, and vice versa. And so making sure players, because it's really easy when they get on the bus, we won the game, we did our jobs. Great, perfect. But it's like, no. Y'all aren't in the first team yet. Like, that's not your job. Your job is to try to really develop and continue to outperform where you were 6 months ago, 8 months ago, 10 months ago. And the score is not going to be the thing that's going to tell us whether you've done that or not.
So how do you so for example, if you play a game on a weekend, how do you approach the following week post-game process to fix these things? Like, do you do classroom? Do you do game and out? Like, what's your process on a Monday, a Friday, after a Saturday game?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think some of it's dependent on the age, right, and the level within the academy, the head coach, maybe how they look to handle it. I think last year working with the 16s, a little bit different. Like this year coming in and working now with our 14s in a full-time capacity. For especially in the U14 space, like, we don't change much week to week. Like, we're focused on us. We're focused on what the needs of those individual players are and what their kind of group needs are and where we think we want to get them to be in the U15 space. And even in U16 last year, very similar. There might be something in, the first day of the week is generally really focused on smaller group pictures, looking at individual pieces of the game that we think are really important for players, maybe on a position basis, or a more general basis if it's working on being able to play with your weak foot, which seems like a really basic thing, but even up through professional academy level, like, it's something that you have to spend time on if we want them to get better at it. And so really individualizing things and doing things in small numbers and small groups, and then building, when's the second 2 days of the week are maybe a little bit more bigger picture team focused.
Right.
But again, I'd say 90% of what we're doing is focused on us and who we want to be and how we want to play and how we think we want to develop players. And maybe there's some things on a Thursday related to an opponent. They've got a different pressing shape than we're used to playing against, or a different build-up shape than maybe we're used to pressing.
Yeah.
So we might look at some things in training, or maybe it's film and we just show them some pictures, and then a pre-match kind of game where, again, we're focused on, or training session, we're really focused on ourselves. And, 4 sessions a week on the field. And I'd say every week, 2 to 3 times where we're in the locker room with film, looking at either clips from the previous games or clips that we are aspiring to be. We use a lot of high level clips, whether it's Premier League or La Liga or MLS or those sorts of things, to show players,
this is what it looks like.
Yeah, this is why we're doing what we're doing, because this is what we want it to look like someday. And lots of, and it varies week to week. If we're doing small group, meeting with 4 or 5 players to look at some film, we're going to do that tomorrow with our U14s. Take 2 groups of 5 players before training, look at really individualized clips for those position groups before we go on the field. And sometimes it's, one-on-one with a player to really dig in and look at some things that we've talked about, whether it's going well, how it's going, or, hey, we've talked about this.
Right.
It's not going the way we want it to go.
Right.
We're going to look at the picture so we can objectively have a conversation about it. But I think it's, kind of a blend of all those things, to be honest.
Right. So at those younger ages, how do you balance translating that properly from a parent perspective, with parents kind of like, are you isolated with them and kind of keep it separate and try to treat them as a young man coming up, or do you have to kind of, I don't want to say wrap it in cotton wool, but do you have to kind of abide by a particular process?
Yeah, it's and again, I think it's a unique environment coming from youth club environments and being in director roles or that sort of thing, and being so closely side by side with parents in the development process in the youth space versus in a professional academy space. Like, I'd say we're not probably side by side. Like, we're a little bit further removed, but really, especially in the younger age groups, trying to make sure that they're continuing to be informed of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And making, parent group chat, parent emails, like those sorts of things. But there's also player group chat. Right. Parents are free to be on it.
Yeah.
But starting to put some accountability on them, that like it's coming to them and they need to be responsible for this information and that sort of thing. We might tell the parents, hey, here's what we told them. We want them to be in charge of it. But, especially younger age, trying to transition them into U16, U18, where the information's coming through you. Yeah. We're not going to tell mom and dad about your schedule and what's happening. It's online and they can kind of see all that stuff. But
be accountable. Yeah.
Now it's coming through you. So I think it's, and the Pathway program, to be honest, has really helped us with that, because I think it gives us a chance, again, to start putting players first in terms of, this is where our contact point is going to be, primarily with the players, but the parents are right alongside it in the Pathway program, really trying to, what are we training this week? Why are we training it? Here's what you're going to see, sharing the film, like doing that kind of thing. So that the hope is, and we'd have to ask the parents, but by the time they get into the full-time program, there's a level of trust and relationship there that maybe they're okay letting go a little bit.
Right. Which comes from consistency on your behalf, right? Because the more consistent you are, the easier it is to kind of take it. I did want to just kind of touch on how you, because obviously I've been fortunate enough to come down. I think I met you for the first time a couple of years ago down there, and what you do down there in the Pathway program is absolutely fantastic. I think it's coming down, watching the sessions, it was absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
But how are you collaborating now, and how would you like to further collaborate with clubs and high schools to be able to connect dots? Because I'm going to get Sasha Bauer's going to come on. We're going to talk about what he's doing. Because I love what he's involved with as well with you guys. But how are you trying to connect with the local clubs to make sure that you can access the talent?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and I think at the very beginning of the intro, you kind of talked a little bit about St. Louis and kind of the culture and the history here, and I think it's again, we are incredibly fortunate to be positioned where we are as a professional club in a city and a market with so much tradition, specifically in the youth development space, because we have so many clubs that do such a good job developing young players. And so I think for us, it's really important to make sure that we're not trying to replace or do what the youth clubs already have an ability to do, so that we're not, mismanaging or limiting the impact of the resources that we have. So I think it's using the pathway program, using, Sean Hewitt, who does a lot of our talent identification and building relationships with directors in the market, to try to make sure that we have a network of folks that we can call and ask about players. What do you think? How are they doing? Do you know of anybody else? Have you seen anyone? Like that sort of thing. And I think, and this past spring I didn't do any, but it was, in the first couple of years, being able to go in at some of the youth clubs and offer coaching education, and offering to come in and allow people to sit and ask questions. How do you do what you do? What's important? Like how do you see youth development? Like how can we utilize some of what's happening there here? And I think I would love to see more of that and more of those opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's key, because I think the coaching development standpoint, I mean, obviously, coaching clinics taking place within clubs is super important, because you want to make sure that the level across the board is consistent. And you don't want to be in a situation where it's like, oh, if you get that coach, you're good. If you get that coach, well, I'm not too sure about it. You know what I mean? So having that, I know at Rush, the coaching clinics, the type of support that we have. This is, for the classic level team, still trying to give them that level of support, so the understanding of the game is the same and the approach is the same, and it's got that consistency. I think that coaching clinics and supporting the coaches is great, which is why obviously you guys opening the doors and allowing coaches to come in and just kind of see what you're about and see how things are done, what sessions can look like, and even just the translation in it as well, the verbiage that's used and all that kind of stuff. All of that stuff is super, super key.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, for like that I think is important, and hopefully there are folks in the market that feel it, is that we come and spend time in the club environments too. It's not always about bringing everyone to us, and I mean that in terms of players and coaches, but being able to reciprocate and come and see players in their training environment, come and see players in their game environment, come and spend time in those youth club spaces, because I think that's also a really good way, standing next to someone and watching a game or watching a group of players is one of the best ways to align what you're looking at and how you're looking at it. And the more people we have looking at players through a similar lens in St. Louis, the better. Not necessarily our lens, just can we get a more collective lens that we're looking at players through for all of us? And I think, it's something that this year, especially, Sean Hewitt and I have talked about, like being able to go and watch more games and spending times with specifically like in the U13 space and that kind of thing, because, we know there's so much talent around the region, and being able to go out and see it where it is. And we also know that bringing players to us for a trial or for the pathway or for whatever else and seeing them on a one-off isn't always the best representation of like who they are as a player.
Either way, because they can not show well or they can get really lucky, and then 2 weeks later you're like, oh, okay, that's not as consistent as you
doesn't seem like that players are overperform very often, but we know that like with stress and for anybody being in a new environment with new people and new voices, like is always, I think, stressful, and it can be hard to perform at your very best.
All right, well, is there anything that you would like to kind of touch on over the next kind of plan for the next 5 years with what you're doing with St. Louis City? Is there anything that you got on the horizon you want to talk about, or you just, I'm on the pathway, I'm getting stuff done, I'm making sure we're producing great players?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, right? And continuing, I think, for us to try to really maximize that pathway program as a way to build connections in the community. And we also hope that at the end of that pathway program that we've helped push some of our resources back into the environment, because not all those players are going to be St. Louis City Academy players. Yeah. And we've kind of done that really intentionally to try to bring in maybe a broader cross section and a bigger group of players that we work with over the course of that pathway program to try to expose them to something different and maybe elevate them and motivate them and just let them see a different level. And then hopefully they take that back into their clubs and back into wherever it is that they're going to be. And it helps everyone in the region and in the market. And, you know, I think for me personally, you know, I'm currently going through the elite formation coaching license with the French Federation as well as part of MLS with a cohort of coaches. And so I think that's been so far like an incredibly demanding, but also like an incredibly rewarding experience. So like the hope is to be able to bring that information back and be able to help not only in our own environment, but also helping like in the environment as a whole in St. Louis to help develop coaches and give that, you know, information and perspective. And I think for me, like that's a real passion as well. Like developing players is a great way to grow the game, but your impact can be so much bigger if you're developing coaches who are then developing players. I can only coach so many players at a time. But getting a room full of coaches or, you know, workshops and things like that, I think is really exciting when you think about what that does for players down the road.
I'll end it there. Thank you so much for your time. I will get this up, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of comments coming in, plenty of extra questions. But at some point, I'd love to have you on again, maybe in the next year or so, and see how that elite French thing that you're involved with.
Yeah.
Hopefully you pass.
You gotta survive it. You gotta survive it first.
Yeah. You'd be like, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. It didn't pan out. It didn't pan out. But yeah, no, hugely appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks.
The Pure Athlete, building and protecting student athletes better. Data-driven injury prevention, performance enhancement, and recovery protocols. The Pure Athlete is committed to helping athletes minimize the risk of injury. They combine science and technology to keep athletes performing at their peak. The Pure Athlete is a proud sponsor of the Car Ride Home podcast.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, run. Bright lights.
Yeah. The ring, the title, the throne, the bragging rights, man, I came from them all. The GOAT, the best, the champ, the top dog, you can name them all. Whoever you had at the top and number one, I'm replacing them all. No matter whoever, however, whenever, how many, I'll take on them all. I'm unstoppable. I'm unstoppable. I'm unstoppable. At this point, it's undeniable. I'm unstoppable. I'm unstoppable. I'm unstoppable. At this point, it's undeniable.